Well, I'm glad to be here, back in this awesome Shabbat. Let's pray. Abba Father, thank you for your grace. Thank you for Yeshua, our Messiah. Thank you for this awesome Shabbat. Thank you because you are our healer. You heal our minds, our hearts, and our bodies. And I'd like to ask you that today we'll learn a little bit about your people, about what's going on around the world, and we also like to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. I like to give a little bit of more information about this topic that I gave a couple years ago, and it's about the two major groups of Jewish people around the world, and at least the ones that we recognize or we see the most here in the United States of America. And these are the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim Jews. And this is just an introduction to different religious groups of Judaism, divisions of contemporary Judaisms. Why I'm going to call it Judaisms in plural, because I do believe we have different kinds of Judaisms is like Christendom. Christendom has different kinds of Christians and beliefs, and the most important thing is that none of these groups represent the whole Judaism per se. Just like Christendom, in Christendom, the Catholics don't represent the whole Christians. The Lutherans don't represent the whole Christendom. The Baptists or the Pentecostals, the Evangelicals, do not represent the whole Christianity per se. So it's the same thing with Judaism, I believe. So let's go right to the point, and these are more or less the outline that I like to present: the cultural divisions within Judaism. The ethnic diversity among Jews has resulted in a number of cultural divisions within Judaism. And this is to understand that understanding these divisions will help us to understand the challenges that face Israel and also the Messianic communities. Why? Because this is where members of these groups have come to live together, either Israel or the Messianic communities. And so you see these enormous amount of cultural backgrounds into the communities, especially the Messianic communities. And so you see the different kinds of customs and traditions. It's very rich in customs and traditions. That's nothing to say that is right or wrong. It's just common traditions and customs and different ideas, foods, etc., and philosophy. We want to see that eventually. And these groups are mainly two, but I like to mention another two or three groups in general. One of them is the Sephardic Jews, the Sephardim. Keep in mind that the M added to the Sephardim will be the plural, Sephardim will be the singular, and Sephardim will be the plural. Same thing with the Ashkenazim, the Mizrahim, the Romaniot, and the Greek Jews. These are the groups I like to present, but I like to talk more about the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. Most important thing to understand is the Sephardim are from Spain and Portugal. Sephora is what in the Bible mentions the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is located in Europe. So when anyone says Sephardi or Sephardim, these are people who were located for many, many years in Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula. But after the Inquisition in 1492, after the decree from Fernando and Isabel of Spain, they moved to Turkey, Greece, Italy, Egypt. Some went to Europe, especially Amsterdam, Netherlands. There's a great Sephardic community in there, and a lot of famous Jews. Even I think Manasseh ben Israel is from Amsterdam. And so you have also a lot of these people who came to the American continent. And so this is Spain in the world. I'm going to quote some books and some people who speak about it, historians. And this is David M. Gitlitz. He says, the history of the Jews on the Iberian Peninsula spans 3,000 years. The beginnings are obscure, but may go as far back as Solomon's trade with Andalusian Tarshish. And that's mentioned in 1 Kings 10:22. Or definition, coastal trading settlements of Iberia and the 10th century BCE, before the Common Era. Jews undoubtedly trade along the Spanish coast during the periods of Greek and Carthaginian domination of the Mediterranean, even though the first tangible archaeological evidence of Jewish Iberians dates only from Roman times. For the next 1,500 years, the fortunes of Iberian Jews followed those of the Romans, Visigoths, Muslims, and Christians who successfully controlled the peninsula. On the whole, Jews fared better when the dominant culture's religion was not fundamentalist in character or conversionist in policy. Jewish low points occur when the Roman in 312 of the Common Era and the Visigothic Stairs 589 of the Common Era became Christian, or when the puritanical Muslim Almoravids on 1090 and later the Almohads 1147-60 Persian Andalusian Islam. The high point was undoubtedly the fluorescence of Jewish culture in Muslim Andalusia during the 10th through the 12th centuries, when Christian dominance over the peninsula was finally assured in the mid-13th century. Jews play a crucial role in cultural transmission and in the financial and political administration of the Christian kingdoms. So it seems like they used to get along with the Muslims, the Andalusians, and the Muslims this kind of Muslims, the Moors, they had this policy of being multicultural, and they allowed the Jewish people to flourish in this part of the continent. Now, these are some of the migrations, if you can see them, some of the migrations and settlements of the Spanish Jews, migrations and settlement, and Portuguese Jews. Eventually, these two turned sour on March 31st, 1492. The Catholic monarchs, Fernando and Isabel, signed an order seizing the Jews 4 months to be Christians or to be gone from Spain and Portugal. From August 1st, 1492, until the late 19th century, they were legally not Jews in Spain. The 15,000 or so Jews who lived there today are almost entirely recent immigrants. There were not sufficient numbers of converts from Judaism in either Muslim or Christian Spain to constitute a separate class of people until 1391. Riots suddenly forced tens of thousands of Jews in Christian Spain to accept baptism. And also we have this map to get a little closer. These are very small countries in compared to what they accomplish around the world. As a result of the discouraging events of the next century, many other tens of thousands of Jews converted to Christianity, and the 1492 expulsions from Spain and the 1497 expulsion from Portugal produced additional waves of converts. Prior to the expulsions, these conversos lived side by side with Jewish neighbors and family members. Following the expulsions, they and their descendants live as a recognizable subgroup among the Christian populace of the Iberian world until they die, emigrated, or assimilated. And this is some of the epithets, some of the names they they gave them. The converts from Judaism constituted a recognizable class of people, or as the Spanish historian Amerigo Castro termed, a caste. Whether on the Iberian Peninsula or in the far-flung provinces of the Spanish and Portuguese empires, the new Christians recognized themselves as a group or groups and were stigmatized as such by their old Christian neighbors. The dozens of epithets coined to identify them frequently suggested both the circumstances of their conversion and their degree of adherence to Judaism. And these are some of the names they call them. The Hebrew-speaking Jews call them Anusim, or forced converts. We still have many, many Anusim. I'm part of them. Meshumadim, they were the willing converts, or they just call them Goyim Gemorim, which means full Gentiles. The Spanish Old Christian called them conversos or confesos, converts. Cristianos Nuevos, which means new Christians or novells. Judaizantes or Judaizers. Marranos, which means pigs, or just plain Judíos. So call somebody Judío then was an offense. And these get to the point that they had to make another group, which is very interesting at this point, how some scholars are trying to get them back to Judaism, and not some scholars, but some rabbis, because of these scholarly investigations and research, etc. They call them crypto-Jews. These are converts that secretly kept the Jewish faith for many, many centuries. And so you see how this small country, Portugal, for instance, dominated the world for many, many years. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, by 1139, Portugal established itself as a kingdom independent from Leon, Spain, in the 15th and 16th centuries. As the result of pioneering the age of discovery, Portugal expanded Western influence and established the first global empire, becoming one of the world's major economic, political, and military powers. The Portuguese Empire was the longest-lived of the modern European colonial empires, spanning almost 600 years, from the capture of Ceuta in 1415 to the handover of Macau to the People's Republic of China. So they expanded all the way to China, all the way to, as you can see in the map, colonies were Brazil. The whole Brazil is basically, it was theirs, and some other islands around. In Africa, they took over a couple big countries like Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Macau, all the way to China, and it's Timor also, all the way in the other continents. So the Portuguese had their own versions of these terms and also called them people of the Natal, or the nations. From the mid-15th to the mid-17th century, as a group, the converts were so economically successful that Spain and then Portugal instituted so-called purity of blood. These purity of blood laws were applied in the Holocaust also. Explicitly to exclude them, to exclude the Jewish people from a variety of professions. As a group, the conversos were the butt of satire, the target of persecution, and the perennial subject of debate both within Spain and without. As you can see in this other graphic, it marks the quest for colonization of the world. As you can see, by 14th and 18th centuries approximately, Spain and Portugal were parts of the empire's questings for the domination of the world. As you can see in the map, the whole yellow area was Spanish. United States is just a small portion. They were probably the 13 colonies in United States of America. As you can see, it was really very small. The Spanish took over some parts of Africa, all the way to Philippines, down to Philippines, India. No, India. India was taken over by the English. France has some parts also in South America, Portugal, Netherlands, Russia, and Turkey. Turkey also took over a lot of the European and Middle Eastern continent, Middle Eastern areas. But you can see in the 1800s still, that's the way they were dominating the whole world. It's very interesting to recognize today that everywhere where the English took over is being successful, and everywhere where the Spanish took over is not. I assume, I'm speculating that that's because of idolatry. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Now, the whole thing is probably part of a prophecy, and this is from Obadiah 1:20, from the Complete Jewish Bible. Those from this army of the people of Israel, exiled among the Canaanim, as far away as Zarphat, and the exiles from Jerusalem and Sephardim will repossess the cities of the Negev. Why am I saying that? Because all these Sephardis, all these people who were scattered all over the world are coming back to Israel today. We have new immigrants in Israel, and according to some statistics, we have lots of people from this particular group of peoples, from the Sephardim. I have no time to go down to the numbers, but we have people from Morocco, Egypt, Sudan, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Argentina, Australia, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Central America, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Ecuador, Mexico, New Zealand, Panama, Peru, United States, Uruguay, Venezuela, and a lot of these people are definitely Sephardim, the Soviet Union, which are Ashkenazim, Syria, Turkey, Yemen, Albania, Austria, Finland, France, Germany. So we have lots of people from different parts of the world. And this statistic is actually from, let me see if I can find it, is from is CBS Statistical Abstract of Israel in 2013. That is updated in 2013, a couple years ago. And you still have more and more immigrants coming back to Israel, making an aliyah to Israel. Of course, Ethiopians, lots of Ethiopians. Again, as you can see in the statistics, you see peoples in numbers and in numbers, quantities, and regions where they're coming from. They're coming from all over the world to Israel. This aliyah is by numbers and by source, this chart. The numbers are telling us about the Sephardic influence in Israel in modern times. The Anusim from the Sephardic communities are taking a very important step to become part of the aliyah of the people of Israel. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Ashkenazim. The name Ashkenazi comes from the Ashkenaz, a descendant of Noah, according to some. Also, Ashkenazi from the Hebrew word for German. Ashkenazim Jews are from Germany and northern France, where Rashi was from. So you see two influential guys for the Jewish people, Rashi from the Ashkenazim, and Maimonides from the Sephardim. And that's part of some of the differences that we're going to see eventually. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki is the name of Rashi. And he was a medieval French rabbi and author of the comprehensive commentary of the Talmud and commentary of the Tanakh. Now, these Ashkenazim followed the customs of the law called minhagim. This is an order or customs. Minhagim is an accepted tradition or group of traditions in Judaism. And this is the related concept of nusach. Anytime you see a siddur, we're going to talk about that eventually also. That's part of the differences. You buy a siddur from the Art Scroll, which is, in the first pages, you see what kind of order of prayers they have. And most of them says nusach Ashkenaz or nusach Sephardim. This is a slight difference. The Ashkenazim refers to those Jews who are one time live in or came from Central Europe, Germany, France, Poland, Hungary, Russia, Austria, Lithuania, and Netherlands. Some believe that the Ashkenazi culture ended in Europe with the Holocaust. Let's see the diaspora that they have. As you can see in the chart, they have Jewish people moving all over the world from Spain and Germany. The Ashkenazi Jews from the Hebrew word for German moved north of the Alps, probably from Italy during the first millennium of the Common Era. During the 9th century, the ancestors of Ashkenazi Jews settled in the cities of the Rhineland, where they adopted German as their language. Over time, this developed into a Judeo-German dialect that was mixed with Hebrew and Slavic words and became known as Yiddish. In the 12th and 13th century, Ashkenazi Jews were expelled from the countries of Western Europe and were granted charters to settle in Poland and Lithuania. As a result, the center of Ashkenazi Jewry shifted to the east, where it remained for the following 5 centuries. I'm sorry. Ashkenazi Jews are Jews in Israel of European origin They include early Zionists, Holocaust survivors, and immigrants and settlers that arrived mainly before and after World War II and their descendants. They make up about half of the Israel's Jewish citizens. The term Ashkenazic is derived from Ashkenaz, the medieval name for of Germany. Okay. Can you let me drive? Okay, it's there. Of the world's Jews, about 82% are Ashkenazic Jews. Ashkenazic Jews have traditionally dominated Israeli politics, the arts, literature, and journalism, and shaped the Israeli mentality. The Israel that people think of is primarily the Israel of the Ashkenazic Jews. As you can, if you go to Israel, you see. Now, you have the Yiddish, the ultra-Orthodox, Silox and Blackcoats and Fiddler of the Roof culture is associated with associated more with Ashkenazic Jews. Ashkenazic Jews are declining in numbers and power and experiencing self-doubt and ridicule, are suffering in a way that is not all that different from the experience by American, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And that's happened because the society is getting very humanistic, very secular, and it's getting tougher and tougher on the Orthodox peoples, not only from the Jewish people, but also the other Orthodox, like the Greek Orthodox, the Orthodox Catholics, the Lutherans, and all of those people who are considered very all kind of style, cultural, religious people. One Israeli scholar told the New Yorker, it turns out the all Ashkenazi, the secular community especially, are the dinosaurs. We lack identity and vitality. And this is one Israeli scholar talking about his own people. All right, let's look to another group. This group, you won't probably see them too much, but this group are probably the most ancient groups of Jews in the world. And some of these people are categorized as Sephardim, but they are not Sephardim. And this is for political reasons. They call them Sephardim. Why? Because they look very Middle Eastern kind of people. They look Arabs, basically. They look like Osama bin Laden. And so, politically, kind of, they categorize them as Sephardim. They've been living in the Middle East forever, and they are, Mizrahi means Eastern, so the Mizrahim are Jews from Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Armenia. As you can see in the picture, this is a Yemenite Jew, and the Armenians are also kind of Middle Eastern looking people. We have another group of people, the Romaniot are just from Italy. They have their own order of prayers, they have their own order of traditions, they have their own way of dressing, a way of wearing their clothing. And also you have the Greek Jews. As you can see, they look a little bit different also, the way they dress. They look Middle Eastern kind of peoples. Other important groups are the Ethiopian Jews and the Asian Jews, the Kaifeng Jews from China, the Kahim Jews from India, and the Karaites. These are groups I'm not going to talk about today. We don't see them as much as we see the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. But as you can see, you see differences in race, I will say. I don't like to use the word race, but they've been categorized as that as well. And I like to talk about some other divisions before I go to questions. These divisions are most of these divisions are divisions from the Ashkenazim world. No, most of them, all of them, basically. This important part, the most important thing is they know when they talk about Torah, they talk about not only the written Torah but the oral Torah, which is the Mishnah, the Gemara, which conforms the Talmud, the Midrashim, and some other writings of today. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are Ashkenazim. And they believe that both of these laws, the oral law and the written law, is being given directly from God to the Jewish people. That's what they believe. Jewish people often do things not mentioned anywhere in the Torah. Why is that? This is because there is an oral commandment to follow. Take, for example, the yarmulke that I'm not wearing today. Nowhere in the Torah does it says to cover one's head. The oral law does talk about covering one's head. One also needs to understand that whereas the written law was always available in a book, the Torah, the oral Torah, had to be passed down from generation to generation. The current rabbis taught the current students, and the students later became rabbis themselves to teach it down to the next generation. The interpretation of the Torah, the written law, is heavily based on the proper understanding of the oral tradition of the rabbis. This is why it is the rabbis themselves who can interpret the commandments of the Torah, because they know the oral tradition. And this is what the Gemara, or the whole Talmud, is all about. It is a collection of many oral traditions and how it applies to the interpretation of the Torah. Now, this is what they believe, okay? And the Orthodox is probably the oldest form of Judaism. Now, how do they came about? Many, many years ago in Europe, the Ashkenazim decided to reform their way, the way of worshiping and the way of doing the meetings in the synagogue, and then decided to do different things like the Lutherans and the other Protestant communities around them in Germany. They decided to do the same thing. There were no more women divided, etc. And so this group came about, and they said, wait a minute, we're not going to reform anything. We're going to do everything as tradition is being for many, many years. And that's why the Reform called them Orthodox, and the Orthodox took over that name. That's why they call them Orthodox. And there's also the Ultra-Orthodox. So, in case that you think that the Orthodox are not crazy enough, we have another group of Jews that are even crazier. But they're not crazy. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to be funny. The ultra-Orthodox Jews arose in the 1700s and 1800s. They were a reaction of the Ashkalah, which means Jewish enlightenment. They reacted by being more observant than they had to be. The ultra-Orthodox Jews believe in exactly the same as the Orthodox. Indeed, they sometimes pray in each other's synagogues. They differ in that the ultra-Orthodox Jews completely seclude themselves from the outside world, whereas the Orthodox Jews can live in a non-Jewish area just fine. The ultra-Orthodox make their own communities and isolate themselves entirely from the outside world. They often wear those funny-looking huge fur hats, long white socks, and they're very pious. They are also called Hasidim, and we're going to talk about the Hasidim or the Haredim eventually. Now also you have the modern Orthodox. The modern Orthodox Jews believe in what the Orthodox Jews believe as well. However, they are more open to associating with the modern world. That's the different. And also they wear different clothes. They are more liberal than the Orthodox. They will not have a problem with going to a movie theater with a non-Jewish colleague classmate. These Jews dress in typical average day clothes. They may wear jeans or t-shirts, nothing too formal like the Orthodox. Their yarmulke is even more artistic and contrast to the Orthodox yarmulke, which is a big black velvet one. Now let's talk about the Reform. The Reformed Jews actually go out of their way to reform the Torah and the lifestyle of Jewish people. This started during the Hashkalah movement, as I said before. Many of them do not even wear a yarmulke. They come on Reformed Jews, not talking about the rabbis, are not very knowledgeable about Judaism as much as the Orthodox are. Keep in mind that all these kinds of people are the Jewish people who come to the congregations, to the Messianic congregations. Even the rabbis are from different kinds of all these congregations. That's why all congregations, the Messianic congregations, are different. That's the difference according to what they believe and their customs, etc., and traditions. The conservative are also called Masorti. The Masorti conservative Jews were a reaction to the Reformed Jews. They saw the Reformed Jews as going too far. For example, the Reformed Jews actually reformed the commandments of the Torah. Conservative Jews still consider the written law to be binding, for it comes from God. But they say that we need to consider the oral Torah and see how it applies to modern times. So they do not segregate men and women in synagogues because they say that is an outdated oral tradition which is not present in the Torah whatsoever. Also, we have in the United States the Reconstructionists. They are basically Jewish people who realized the Torah was not written by God, but by men, and now they practice Judaism only as a ritual. They follow the commandments unless there is good reason not to practice them. So they may keep Shabbat to an extent, or even kosher, only because they want to hold on to the tradition and they think it's a good idea. It's just, for them, it's just a bunch of laws and traditions that are not commanded by God. The humanistic, these are Jewish people that do not practice Judaism, do not believe in Judaism. They don't even believe in God. They still enjoy being part of Judaism and its people. And there's a lot of people who are humanistic too, not only Jewish people. And then you have the secular, which is very obvious what kind of people they are. Now, let me mention a little bit about the Orthodox Jews and the modern Orthodox. The Haredi or Haredim are the ultra-Orthodox. These are from a yeshiva of Lithuania. And then you have the Hasidim. 300 years ago, Rabbi Baal Shem Tov founded the Hasidim movement. He was very intellectual, but he taught Kabbalah and mysticism to poor Jews. There were a good bunch of Jews in Europe who were very poor, and the way this rabbi started to teach them was in taverns. Jewish people were very tired working, and they will meet in the taverns every day. So these rabbis, beginning with Baal Shem Tov, who founded the Hasidim movement, he used to go to the taverns and have a couple drinks and talk to the Jewish people about this idea of static prayer. Again, taverns were their point of meeting. They became very popular in the Eastern Europe. People expressed their emotions through prayer, dance, and songs, very similar to the evangelical movement of modern times, of course, without the alcohol thing. With their focus on the masses, they moved from Lithuania to Poland to Russia, etc. And then you have another group which is, I haven't written there that group. It's called the Miznachdim. The Miznachdim were from an opposite to the Hasidic movement. The Miznachdim or Mitnagdim is a Hebrew word that means opponents. It is the plural of Miznached or Miznached. The term Miznachdim commonly refers to opponents of Hadisim. They were opponents because they thought these people are illiterate, they don't know what they're doing, they're too emotional, and so on. And so they gained a common usage among Jews living in Europe as the term that referred to Ashkenazi Jews who opposed the rise and the spread of the early Hasidic Judaism. Now, when Baal Shem Tov died, the Hasidic movement was controlled by Rabbi Dov Ber ben Abraham of Mezerich. He died in 1772. He is also known as the Maggid of Mezerich. He was a disciple of Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, and was chosen as his successor to lead the early movement. Rabbi Dober is regarded as the first systematic exponent of the mystical philosophy underlining the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and through his teachings and leadership, the main architect of the movement. Now, and the Hasidim continue growing in different parts of the world. When they continue growing, we have this particular group that is well known in the United States of America, and it's called the Chabad. Everybody knows Chabad? Have you heard about Chabad? No? No. Okay, very interesting. Chabad means Chokhmah, Binah, Divat. On a simplistic level, Chokhmah is wisdom. It is an ability or attribute of a person. Binah is understanding. It is the use of Chokhmah to understand something. Da'at is knowledge. Da'at or Da'av. It is the acquired idea that one was understood with Chokhmah through Binah. So it's all philosophical and mystical. There are some other terms and concepts that you will see in Chabad.org. For them, according to Chabad Hasidus, which is itself the acronym of Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at, the explanations are as follows. Chokhmah is a spark. It is the first flash of an idea. For example, sometimes one is struggling over a problem and they get a flash of inspiration, a eureka, if you will. If their friend were to say, okay, now explain it to me, the response will be, give me a second, I need to think about this. It's undeveloped and unrealized, to quote Chabad.org. Binah is on the step, and Da'at is the conclusion. So it's all philosophical and mystical. Again, that's why all these communities do not represent the whole Judaism, because basically they're not based in the Bible but in philosophy. So Chabad is also known as Lubavitch. Why? Why these all names? Lubavitch, Sadmar, Vov, Pupa, Breslov, Karliner, and many, many other names. They are part of the same Chabad movement. They the same Hadisim or Hasidic peoples. These names are according to the village where their movement developed. It's where the founders are from. But it's the same particular kind of group, Chabad, all the same. And all of them with different systems or philosophy, lifestyles, ways of dress, or wearing their hats, different customs and traditions. All of this happened in the Ashkenazi movement. They're part of the Ashkenazim. Sephardis are very traditionalist. One of the major traditions is the Mechitzah, which is the separation of sitting of men and women in the synagogues. The Sephardim have no separations, no divisions, I would say. They have not this kind of divisions. They create traditional synagogues. What is different is the way the individuals observed. That's the difference. Some Sephardim are using the word Orthodox to be respected of their traditional observances, which are not by the Ashkenazim as Orthodox. But again, Sephardis are not Orthodox. Let's talk a little bit about the differences of the main differences between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim are basically philosophical, traditional, in customs and language. One of the main differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim is philosophical. As I say before, the Orthodox groups are mainly Ashkenazim, and their Judaism is based in philosophy, not in the Bible or the oral Torah. They use some of the traditions of the oral Torah, but their fundamental tenets are based on mysticism and philosophy. The two main pillars on which all the scholarship of the modern Judaism rests, and the ideas, philosophy, and traditions are based on Rashi and Rambam. They differ not only in issues of philosophy, but in the overall approach. Part of the reason for this is that Rashi was Ashkenazi and Rambam was Sephardi. Each was a product of distinct traditions. That's what they have. The main difference, again, is philosophical. And the traditions are based also in where they were from. A little bit of history, the Jews were sent into exile in 70 CE. The main Jewish community in the diaspora was Babylonia. It was the only place in the world where Christianity did not take over, and therefore the Jews thrived there. They built their own yeshivas and lived autonomously. Thus, they were free to engage in the centuries of scholarship that produced the Talmud. In 9th century, the Jewish community in Babylon began to decline, so many Jews went to North Africa, with what's populated by two Muslim tribes, the Berbers and the Moors. The Berbers were fierce warriors, while the Moors were artisans, mathematicians, and merchants. They invented mathematics, algebra, and all of that. So blaming the Arabs for the mathematics, those who don't like mathematics like me. The cutting edge of the civilization, together they became a tremendous force in the world. Now, the Jews saw they had an opportunity with them, particularly with the Moors, who were less religious and therefore more tolerant. Their alliance with the Jews lasted almost 400 years, and by the time the Moors were emigrated from North Africa into Spain, they brought along the Jews as equals. Thus, the Sephardim Jews live in an open, intellectually advanced society. The study of philosophy abounded, so the Sephardic Jewish scholarship became philosophical. The Jews also rose in public life, becoming government ministers. Maimonides was the court physician and the Sultan of Egypt. Individual Jews sometimes suffer assaults in their Muslim neighbors, but there were no crusades, no pogroms per se, no Holocaust. The Ashkenazim Jews, on the other hand, never had a good day. They live in a primitive world full of constant danger. Western Europe was dunked into the Dark Ages. Less than 1% of the population was literate. Even the great King Charlemagne was the first to invite the Jews to Europe, could not sign his own name. They were invited to Europe. A small group of Jews left Babylonia and settled in German Rhineland, mostly in the cities of Worms, Speyer, and Mainz. but because the church converted to the native pagans, Christianity became a religion full of superstition and brutality. This, in part, gave rise to the Crusades and the pogroms of the Black Death. So, it is basically a miracle that the Ashkenazi Jewry survived those early centuries, but not only did survive, but they grew. They grew a lot in numbers and in philosophy. Another influential sage was the Sephardic interpretation of laws found in Joseph Caro's Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is also known as the Code of Jewish Law, and you find these in both communities, but there are halakhic rulings of the Shulchan Aruch generally follow Sephardic law and customs. The Ashkenazi Jews, they usually follow the halakhic rulings of Moses Isserlis, whose glosses the Shulchan Aruch, and you see that note where the Sephardic and Ashkenazi customs differ. Now, the traditional customs and language. While the Sephardim view their Muslim neighbors as equals, the Ashkenazim their illiterate Christian neighbors with disdain. They led an insular existence, and their sole intellectual pursuit were Torah and Talmud. And their and this is what accounts for the different traditions and characteristics of the Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Today, the distinction between Sephardim and Ashkenazim is primarily one of different traditions due to the backgrounds and different languages. Ladino is a mix of dialect of Hebrew and Spanish and Arabic. Yiddish, a mixed dialect of Hebrew and German and Polish. Religious melodies during the services, festival traditions, Hebrew pronunciation are among the things that differ between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. So when someone says to you, Good Shabbos, it's definitely Yiddish. You should say Shabbat, right? Shabbat Shalom, but no Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos is... But if somebody says that to you, you don't tell them, you don't say Good Shabbos, you say Shabbat Shalom, all right? But that's one of the differences. Only Ashkenazim are subdivided into Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, etc. Sephardim remain largely homogeneous and more traditionally religious, and that's why some mistaken this group as Orthodox, but they are not Orthodox. However, it is an orthodoxy that encompasses the entire spectrum of Sephardim, with obviously some Sephardim more religious than others. And due to the influence of philosophers like Saida Gaon and Maimonides, who attempted to integrate now known science and Aristotelian reason and logic into what has become known as rational Judaism, that's another group, it is usually in practice, if not dogma, often less rigid than one would expect. In contrast, in Ashkenaz culture, dogma and tradition took on its own force, even if subsequent theological arguments proved the basis to be incorrect. So another different, to finish, is the Sidurim. The Nusachot is the order of Ashkenazim Sidurim. Eventually incorporated Sfard, and then you have different kinds of Sidurim. The order of prayers is in the prayer books vary slightly. Sephardic Jews, but no Ashkenazi Jews, allows levirate marriage. You know what levirate marriage is? Is the arranged marriages. And the Passover diet is more restricted for Ashkenazi Jews than for Sephardic Jews. All these groups were being we've been talking about, had their customs and traditions and different ways of prayer. Thus, they have different kinds of prayer books. You have the Nusachot of the order of Ashkenazim Sidurs. You have Sephardi Sidur, Spanish, Portuguese, Sephardi Sidur Mizrahi, the Sephardi Rama Sidur, the Sephardi Greek Sidur, the Greek Sidur, the Ramban Sidur, the Gemini Sidur, which is the same Rambam Sidur. The R scroll Sidur is Ashkenazi and combine all these prayers in one Sidur. So anytime you see the R scroll, they really have different customs, nuzachot. They combine them and they put a book together. And that will say in the first page of the Sidur, it will tell you the order of the prayers. Usually the outer scroll will say Nusach Ashkenaz on it or Nusach Sephardim on it. Sephardi systems are not described as orthodox, but traditionally they look at the balanced life connected to the Torah and the culture around them. A lot of Sephardim Jews were, when they returned to Judaism, looked like the Ashkenazi Orthodox conversion. They converted to the Ashkenazim. And that's it for this class. I got some of my resources if you want to look. Again, some websites and some books you can check on. Next time, probably I'm going to talk about the divisions within the Messianic communities today, which again are influence for all these groups and all these groups of Jewish people from the Sephardi and the Ashkenazi communities. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.